All right, Game Brain time, Fiction Factory.
Yeah, Fiction Factory, Game Brain. I like Fiction Factory for sure, but I think I had that as a focus for like doing writing as a primary because I was like doing
Yeah,
story writing and stuff like that. So I might just keep that as its own segment and do podcasts specifically to that, which I don't know. I think that I'm the whole Get Dangerous idea was like built as the brand, but it kind of is like becoming as I figure this shit out
right.
because initially it was just like, yeah, I gotta take the risk, take the dive, do that, get dangerous, just like Darkwing Duck said, and so there it was.
It's you gotta get that out there, get the consistency, and then we just see what happens after that.
Yeah. All right.
All right, so so the idea here is that this is going to be one of many episodes where we do some game design world building for
Yep.
this unique game system that that we've been playing in for the better part or what, like almost a year and a half now or something.
Yeah, it's been
That
close to
you've
18
been
months.
playing in for a long time.
Yeah, I started when I
Um,
was 20 years old, and I've been playing it ever since.
all right, so the name of the game is Shadows.
Yes.
And what exactly is Shadows?
Well, the origin of it was a little weird. The primary basis of it came to me. I wasn't like all of this was sort of like handed down. So the person that I encountered who originally created this mishmash between Cyberpunk 2020 and White Wolf had called it Shadows because honestly, I think it just sounds gritty and dark. I don't know what the original purpose was.
Definitely, after playing in it, I say it's appropriate.
Yeah, yeah, I took those themes. So like grit, cyberpunk, supernatural, a little bit of Lovecraft kind of thrown in there. Like a lot of that dark and gritty just kind of put into it. So when you're realizing just how many dark things are involved, shadows, the plural makes perfect sense because there's a lot of them, and they seem to have a
Yeah.
lot of like personal agendas. Um, so like whenever it came to my attention that this thing even existed, I got really roped in, just like everybody else who plays this. It was like new system, felt really different. I'd been playing D&D for a long time, and then Shadows came along and totally derailed me because I could just make up whatever the hell I wanted, and it was a lot different from like using classes from D&D or Palladium superheroes or any other system really. Like I've seen point systems before, but they usually were like really sluggish. I think this is just an opinion, but the worst representation of a point-based system, which is the what tries to do the organic growth and the rest of it, where they have more of like it's more about your race than your class, which is technically a job. Um,
Right.
they try to do that. So White Wolf is constantly renowned for their point system and the fact that it's very story based. You have very prominent foundations, like in Vampire, it's all about your clan, and Werewolf, the same thing. You've got your tribes, and then you have like they kind of follow the same points. You know, Mage, it's the same format, same system throughout, regardless of whatever it is you're playing in that particular world. So they all have the same structure. Shadows does not do that. If you are playing of a specific race, it feels like you're playing a whole other race. You might as well be alien. So like
Right. And in the setting of the game, race is not necessarily human, dwarf, elf, half elf,
right.
varying flavors of elf. It's kind of human are the default normal creatures that make up the world, and then you've got the supernatural as like a contrast to that.
Right. Yeah, everything is firmly integrated. Everything is interconnected. But the really um, the really important thing about it is the fact that it has such a degree of versatility compared to anything else, and that's so like Shadows is the world in which you play, and I used to refer to it as Shadows System, so I'd usually intermix the two, but we've changed that to Synergy System instead. So what Shadows is supposed to be is a heavily role play and high octane, but like action style, very cinematic in its posture, and then you have all the little trimmings that fall into it, which is like the degree with which the systems interplay on each other. Now, initially, the mechanics were Cyberpunk and White Wolf, and that was pretty much the gist. That was it.
Right. It was like a let's meet in the middle.
Right. As it turns out, I didn't know this, but there was a lot of people that were trying to get this to happen. It was like a really big deal. There's like Reddit threads and other stuff that was going on about, has anybody figured out how to make Cyberpunk and White Wolf work together? And there was like not really, like people were like, like they were just kind of whatever. And then I'm going like, I've got it. It works.
I've cracked the code.
Yeah, but it wasn't me that cracked it. I just kind of like took the system that was handed to me and like, this kind of sucks in certain areas. Can I fix that? And that was where I kind of, because ever since I started playing D&D and got really invested, like probably at the 3-year or 4-year mark, I was like, I want to do one of these on my own. I want to build my own system and the rest of it. And then I got really deeply concentrated into trying to build my own system. And I tried not to use shadows at first, because I was like, it's not something that came, it's like, it's not something that I developed. It's something I walked into and then improved in small, subtle ways. And, then I started running it for groups of people, and they were all like, it's like, man, this is yours. This is all yours. You've been running it for years. Nobody's laid any claim. Nobody's done anything with it. You just need to, it's like the world's, like whatever storylines you had, they're gone. Like, it's all yours. You should just run with it. And I'm like, all right. And I kept saying, all right. I just kept waiting. And then, like, about 2 years ago, shortly after all of the disasters, Sean finally convinced me. He was a friend of mine. And he was just like, it's all yours, man. You have to do this. I'm like, all right, fine. I will jump into it and see what it's going to be. And then I so happened to encounter all of y'all, which wound up being perfect, because I was like, I want to run this thing over. And then it was, as a slight tangent, I'll never forget the first major battle that you guys all had with the Outsiders when it came to your reactions. Because, Bill was the one who like had me targeted completely on you as a player. He's like really about, like rules, regs, the rest of it. He's very detail oriented. I was like, okay, I better make sure that I have the answers and not just be like smoke up the butt whenever he gives me a question. It's like, because, and I wouldn't want to do that anyway, but I was like suddenly worried that the system was going to be like, oh shit, he's going to look at it and it's going to go blah, 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 and like that's going to have.
It's not going to stand up to scrutiny, but it totally did.
Yeah, it totally held.
Well, and I'm very, I'm a forever DM, right? My history is I've been playing since AD&D 2nd edition, primarily as a game master, dungeon master. And so, and my day job, I'm a regulatory person. So I'm like, rules are that comforting blanket that I wrap myself in. And I was so frustrated in those first few sessions of Shadows, because it is such a unique setting. As a campaign setting, Shadows and, the world of Night City, the New York Territory expansion, NYTE City.
Oh, I love the fact that we managed to pull that off.
It felt so foreign to me. And, and I'm used to like literal Dungeons and Dragons sort of situation, but the idea that my character had a gun and that we were trying to figure out armor mechanics, and it wasn't, in other systems, it's always just reduction or cover fire or whatever, but that this was like a concerted effort. The fact that my character uses gun kata, which I like pulled out of my air, out of the air from my love of like cheesy action movies and Equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, my character uses guns. What martial art am I supposed to use? Oh, what about gun kata? And you said, all right.
Yep.
Let's figure out how it works. And I feel like that is the strength of this synergy system, is that there's a baseline of rules, with that very last bullet point saying yes and.
Yeah.
Like, and but it's not all made up. It's not all bullshit. It's like we have this really, really good structure. It's a really nice solid mannequin that we can put all these different types of clothing on, like to make it work for us. So I'm looking at the little blurb that we have for the core rulebook, which started working on or making into reality like about a year ago. It feels like it's been longer than that, but really only a year ago. And it says it's 2074 and the world as you know it is headed downhill. That's the intro to Shadows.
Right.
Right? It's not this like you're a brave shining knight and you've gone to rescue save the town. Like in many cases you might be not necessarily evil, but you might be the worst thing that people have ever encountered in their quiet lives of Night City.
Yeah, I mean, if you took your standard garden variety street level like baseline character and throw it into a D&D, like most of them would probably wind up being neutral evil easy. But that's
Right.
not, like the alignment is very black and white when it comes to most other systems. But you look at Shadows and it's like, yeah, this is where neutral evil is survival. Like,
Right. Everyone is trying to do their best to survive, to live by whatever code they have established for themselves.
whatever survival principle they can grab a hold of, they go
Right.
with. Yeah. Good, bad, indifferent,
Um,
ugly, doesn't make a difference. Does it work?
yeah. And Night City, this world that this campaign setting Shadows is unbelievably huge. Like I think you said it goes the majority of the eastern seaboard from what we would know as Maine all the way down to Florida,
Yeah. All the way
basically.
north to south, state and a half wide, just the entire eastern seaboard is nothing but urban expanse. Absolutely. And
So,
I think that's the I have to give you credit because I think you were the one that came up with the whole New York territory expansion as Night City. That was the best thing. I couldn't keep to Neon City. It was fucking me up. But I was like,
I'm
how?
sure it was.
Yeah, but I mean, like, why are we calling it Night City? Because originally it was just slang. Like, oh, we pulled it from the books and stuff, so we're just keeping it. But here, like, it
Right.
becomes much more personalized. It's literally the history of the actual, that territory now, and that makes perfect fucking sense. So that lines right up.
Yeah, so looking at the kind of in-world history, the city of New York kind of got, bigger and bigger and started swallowing up everything else. And the state of New York swallowed up everything else, and now it's this gigantic megalopolis,
Yeah,
which
which is
is a
all.
fantastic word.
Yep. It is, but it was all primarily funded, created by corporations, which I'm sad to say is kind of like what's happening now. Like
Well, that's
corporations,
the
like
weird thing is every Thursday when we go to sit down and play, I'm like, how much of this is gonna mirror, it's like it's the not the onion where you read
right.
that news that you're like, oh, this is not actually fake. It should be fake. But we've got billionaires paying slave wages and then blasting off into space.
Yeah, yeah.
We're
It's
like, ha
it's
ha ha. Oh wait, that was actual real life.
yeah, just shouldering themselves right there in the midst of everything else and getting a bunch of money. And all these corporations, for the most part, save like one with an actual moral agenda above, who gives a shit about anybody else? Just give me money, which like the motivation of one of the major like five top corporations in all of Night City. Because yeah, I mean it's just it, you're right. It's freaking big, and the amount of lore that I'm gonna have to start pushing in for everything, it's mind-boggling. Like everybody's going like, hey, why don't you write up some more? I'm like, I'll see you next year then, because like just one piece of lore. Like if I just talk about the city streets, the corporations, how they've interlinked, and all the different like the various headquarters and why they're in private warfare, like that's a book into itself. And then you bring in the unseen courts, which is the next phase. That's like the next layer down, because like it's almost like the power levels basically bring you deeper into the abyss. So the more powerful you are, the more fucked up shit's gonna happen to you for sure. Um,
Right.
and it's just, yeah. I mean, how do you describe Night City in a short paragraph? Well, I don't think you can.
Well,
Um,
let's kind of break some of these down though, right? So we've got this human world on the surface, right? That is it's the year 2074. Corporations have taken over. It's kind of that I don't want to say trope, but it's kind of that standard cyberpunk sort of on its surface, right? That's the world that you're looking around. People have either, cybernetic limbs, or they might have some upgrade, that gives them like a cool, skin watch that glows, or their hair can change color, or they've got built-in speakers, or, whatever. They've got all of these things because we figured out cybernetics. The
Mm-hmm.
internet is kind of this all available to everybody all the time, the net. So
Yeah.
we've got like that kind of net runners and all that. And then you mentioned, we've got these major corporations which are kind of the official running everything because the government is almost powerless.
Pretty much, yeah. It's more like it's kind of like the British Parliament versus the royalty. There's like
Right.
you
The
know
figurehead.
yeah. There is a now pretty much a fictional government body acting as if they still matter, and then the rest of it is ongoing because they do.
So
So
we've got that layer, right? So we have the street level people kind of eking out of survival. The guy selling, at the 7-Eleven, and the person who's like working as an accountant or whatever. That kind of base level life. Our heroes are, you know, somewhere above that and a little bit more cinematic. They've got a little more edge to them.
usually
Then we've
they're
got these
willing to take more
massive
risk.
corporations, right?
Yeah.
And then we've got this like, let's pull the veil of reality back, and we've got the unseen court. So what is that? The unseen court? Is that all the supernatural? Is that a subsection of it? How much of what would people, let's say me, I'm a big consumer of movies and everything like that. If they were, to watch a movie or a cartoon, read a comic, watch a TV show, that would give them kind of a glimpse into something similar. Are we talking like Matrix meets Underworld? Like, what's what sort of entry point would you imagine? Because the
So
normal people are unaware of the
yeah.
unseen court.
Yeah, like so you have I would say it's probably a matter of awareness. Um, so you have the vast majority of people. So if we're gonna do this like we're zooming in, it's probably the best way to do it.
Right.
It's like from the outside, from the highest possible level of analysis. You have Night City, this gigantic megalopolis, which is now being, it's kind of its own living entity in a sense because the people who live within it are just meat for grinding, and
Yes.
it's this big monster. Like the city itself is the monster.
It's
That's the
churn.
crux of, yeah. It basically is this constant spinning gear that's just grinding everybody underneath it, and it's almost become kind of like a contest. Like it doesn't matter what culture you're in. It seems like human beings have this tendency to always be like, all right, we're getting smashed, and then there's this like this real need to rival this ginormic, gigantic problem and become this like completely godlike figure in the face of such tremendous, like awful misery or awful odds, however you want to describe it. So that's kind of what's happening. Is that most people though are just trying to avoid being stepped on, and then there are a few that just decide that they're going to try and take this monstrosity on, and then even fewer will actually manage to kind of garner a little bit of success on that front, and fewer still will dive deeper into a realm that they never even knew existed. So you've got like all of the lights, all of the advertisements, the huge buildings, the incredible sense of like, I don't know, dystopian despair that's constantly everywhere, and people are just trying to like do their own thing, not get shot, just want to get it, like just want to go to the store, get milk, come back without being dead in the next 15
Right.
minutes.
Right.
So that's life at the street level, and then instead of like sort of like de-escalating that problem, you have the unseen courts, which live in and amongst all of this. And as far as like what they are, well, I would say if you were to term them as kingdoms or factions or allegiances, even perhaps realms, depending on where you go, you have fae, werewolves, vampires. You have the outsiders now. They're kind of more of their own faction slash realm than what they ever used to be because they've stuck around for so long. Then you've also got Beastkin, demons, angels. You have the Nightcasters, which was something that came from me a while back, and then you know there was. God, I'm trying to remember all the archetypes. Yeah, there's also there was like the Nephilim, which originally was just called Highlanders
Right.
because the person who originally constructed this, she was really big into the Highlander series, and so was I. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? We'll throw that in there. No big deal. So but basically what they are is demigods, and that's how we basically organize them into this. Instead of saying like they're Highlanders, get out of the way, copyright, like they're not. It's just that they follow the same basic rule set, but they are their own entity in this particular setup. And yeah, so there's many, many more, but anything that is supernatural that has a large enough population or a community to have leaders that play a role in how things change or manifest or are created inside of Night City, if they have any possibility that they run inside of that, then yeah, they're part of the unseen courts because they are considered to be a power, or a superpower amongst the supernatural beings. So that's how they interlace. And then of course there is a single human faction involved, and that would be let's see here. Yeah, I think it was De La Rosa. She's the only one, Violet De La Rosa.
Right.
She's the only human being that holds superpower status amongst the unseen courts, and that's because she has complete control, to their astonishment, complete control of the Silk Road, which is gateways to various realms without any issue. And despite the fact that she has that power, she's decided to play along. Basically saying like, look, I've got all this stuff, you guys can run this along, but she's used this to acquire her own strength. And but then you have all the other superpowers which are going to be looking at her like a target because it's like she's squishy, she's mortal. Why don't we just take her out? I mean, it's not that big a deal. Put somebody who's actually going to live long enough to support it. You know what I mean? Because they're thinking about
Yeah.
it long term. It's like she's not immortal. She's going to die soon. How is she going to manage it whenever she's dead? Or they can even just be patient and be like, yeah, she's going to die soon. So why bother? Just let her croak and then we'll take over when she's gone.
Right. What's 30 years to an immortal being, right?
Right. And it's like we'll be here when she's
So,
gone.
and then as players,
Yeah.
right? Because I think one of the elements, and we'll dive into some of these elements, I think, in other episodes. But on the character creation side, as players, you're not limited to human plus job, right? You're not
Right.
fighter, rogue, wizard
Right.
sort of situation. You can be one of these other, we'll say, races or archetypes.
Mm.
And so that's kind of being built into the system that maybe you are, what makes you able to be part of the quote unquote adventuring party is that you have been exiled from one of these powers, or you're an envoy for one of the powers who,
Right.
something like that. And I think that is a real, I don't know, cool element of this is that in looking at you can have the characters that are, well, just the character creation, that first step where you're looking at power level,
Right.
right? So that is one of the unique elements of this synergy system, this D10 system, where you've got these power levels. So as the game master, you can establish kind of the tier of play. Are we, doing that street level? Are we doing a heroic? Are we doing a more cinematic? Or is it like all hell is literally hell is breaking loose and the world is coming to an end, sort of situation? And where you decide to enter that campaign kind of determines what's available to your character in the character creation. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily like a standard like level 1 to 20, level 1 to 30 character progression.
Nope.
It's not like, oh, well, I killed 10 rats, so now I'm level 2.
Right. And the system also kind of has, I think, probably for anybody that would be starting out new, especially if they're trying to DM it, I think probably one of the hardest things that you could ever encounter is the fact that there is no like heavily defined like leveling system to give you that We're like, well, for sure, this challenge rating versus this particular group of this many is going to have, like, there's no definitive answer there. It's kind of, it's.
I rely on that as a DM to know how many goblins do I throw at my players. Well, there's 6 of them. They're level 3. I can throw 10 goblins or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and even for me, where I'm sitting there going like, okay, it's been a while since the Shadows game has run as long as the one that we've had playing, so I had to start pulling out all the stops to see exactly what the hell you guys could all do, right? So you guys were like smashing one thing after the next, Got a little harder, like towards the end there, and then of course you have Barrick and his Meltomatic friggin' plasma rifle, just slagging the enemy in like no uncertain terms. Well, and see, the funny thing to me is that I'm never worried about that kind of thing. Like, I don't worry about, like, it's going to be too easy, too hard, too whatever, because the freedom of choice is, like, if you encounter something, you're not locked in to go, like, oh, well, yeah, now we're doomed. Party wipe. It's not...
Right.
It's not quite like that. If you use your critical thinking, you can escape the situation and get out of there if you recognize it soon enough. Not to say that party wipe isn't possible, because it is. And I've thrown enough...
Third session in, we lost a player.
Yeah, yep.
Or a character. We didn't lose a player. We lost a character.
Yeah, the player died. The character's still in it, though.
I was like, I don't know if I can play this. It's too... I don't
know. That's what I was like laughing at. I was like, man, he was so like, just a little too intense. But yeah, I mean, like that's the fun of it, though, is that the risk is really up there. And if you play your cards right, then the game will actually satisfy you, because you'll learn the real rules, which is not so much the mechanics, but the how can I decide to do what I'm doing as the player to make sure I have the highest level of advantage? Because that's really what you're gunning for, and the GM is not meant to be opposition to that. They're meant to be like, yeah, this is a crazy situation you're walking into. Think really hard and just like, combine powers, be Captain Planet, do whatever you got to do to make the situation work in your favor. Yep.
I think that Captain Planet would probably fly away in horror at Night City, but I think that is dead on. It's that, I don't know, I would say the synergy system is not a Munchkinized min-maxing system.
No.
But it definitely rewards coordination and communication with your fellow players. It rewards creativity. I would say that if you're used to just looking down at your spell list and hitting I'm gonna hit Witch Bolt over and over, or whatever, I'm gonna swing my sword over and over, like, it's not gonna be a satisfying game. And the fact that we've definitely had situations where one of the other players is like, well, I'm gonna wait on my turn so that we can like do like a tag team scenario. That for me, that feels very like, I don't know, Marvel versus Capcom, like arcade team up, when like Iron Man and Captain America like, and they like do some like combo move, which you have to have in order to beat this big bad, who I think in our last session, ominous flying entity appears out of nowhere and like explodes the nearby city block into dozens of Volkswagen-sized spiders that come pouring out of the building toward us, and we're taking our best shots, and they're missing or bouncing off. It's like, okay, we can't use the standard approach. Now we're gonna have to be a little more creative.
Right.
And I appreciate that you can be rewarded for this. I also appreciate that you can the leveling system as it is with what is it, IP, right? So
yeah.
What is that? Oh, IP.
IP
improvement points.
Yes. Yep. That stands
so
for...
this IP as improvement points, that per session, per scene, whatever, you can take that and say, I need to shore up this specific element of my character. I want to be able to attack twice in a turn, or I want to have a stronger will. I mean, the fact that you're able to improve stats, that you can gain multiple attacks, or that you can, for enough IP, describe a power that you wish you had, and work with the GM to make it a reality,
Yeah.
right? Like, and then, 6, 7 sessions later, quote unquote, level up that power that you described, right? So I think it puts some of the onus on the players to not just sit back and passively receive story. They have to be actively engaged in the
Yeah.
creation of the world,
Well, and that's
which is
yeah.
fun. It scratches an itch that I didn't know was there, and I think that from a game design standpoint, from a world building standpoint, this is a very richly layered experience, and you have to participate. You cannot just sit back. Um, you have to be engaged. You have to participate as a player, and you'll be richly rewarded for it.
Yes. I mean that's the cardinal principle before you even build the character. I think that's it starts out in our core rulebook, but I mean like I can't emphasize this enough. You have to have a really solid character concept before you jump in. We can't just be like I want to make a fighter. Like that's not enough. That's barely anything. In fact.
Right. Right.
It's like, what do you fight with? What's your style? Why do you have this? What happened to you? Why you? It's like your life's already crap, so why did you go more crap? Like,
Why are you volunteering
yeah.
to dive into the churn head first?
Mm-hmm. Really, what's the deal? Like, why would you choose to do that? I mean, is it just Sylvester Stallone's is like, I'm in it for the action. Like, is that's really like you're gonna go? It's like there are basic things that could be said that you can get away with that still act as like, okay, it's enough of you have enough cliches that they kind of come together and make something weird. Like you can do that.
Sure. Right.
But what I really enjoy watching is somebody going like, I'm gonna do this like it just comes like this branch out the side of their head. I'm like, wow, that's really wacky, dude. Let's do it.
Well, yeah, Drew's character, Ivar the Enlightened, introduced a new concept for me, which is using a in-game consequence to create a disadvantage for the character, right? Because characters can have advantages and disadvantages,
Mm-hmm.
and the dice play as much a part in it as the players do. But he failed some rolls. He got hurt pretty badly, and then his character took the disadvantage that always makes him go last because he's got like combat paralysis, right?
Yes. Yep.
And that works.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it works, and it's a hell of a disadvantage to take too, because it's a 10-pointer.
It really is.
That's a big one. It's like if you always
he
choose to go last, man.
Earned it.
Yeah.
He earned it, right?
Yes.
But like
you did.
it feels very real. It's not, and I love D&D, right? We play weekly, but the whole idea of like I leveled up to 3, now I can hide better.
Yeah.
Like now I can stab someone and dodge, arrows that are thrown at me.
When was I
Okay.
practicing that?
Like yeah, I'm a monk and I've been out on the road and all of a sudden I'm immune to poison.
Yep.
I've never been poisoned before, but
I didn't know that I
okay,
was.
cool.
Yeah, as far as the character was concerned, he gets hit with a poison dart. It's like, I guess I must have always been like this. Yeah.
Right.
How would he know?
Yeah, but
that's
the idea that you slowly build these things up, and like you said, you can nibble at it and do a little. I'm gonna raise 3 skills up, or you can save up and say I'm gonna make this big transformative shift.
right. And you can say that's. I love that aspect of it. Going like, okay, we're going through all this crap because realistically, in my own experience, the way that things happen for me is that I pretty much feel like I'm not getting anywhere, and then all of a sudden, after I've been rampantly exposed to a lot of crap, is that suddenly I find out I can do stuff I never thought I could do. And that's kind of like the saving the IP and then dumping it later. And it's not that you haven't been exposed to whatever it is that you suddenly get better at. It's just kind of like you finally assimilated the information. Like, oh, I fucking get it now.
It crystallized, right?
Yeah.
Like you had a good sleep,
Yeah.
you had a good meal, you stared off into the distance for a while, and you suddenly got that joke that someone made 2 months ago.
Yeah, it's just, but it's like
Oh.
body and muscle memory, skills, all those things. Or you can just trickle it in, which is what most people do. They just kind of like trickle it in and slowly build up all the stuff that they think is their favorites.
Yeah, they're hungry for, they want the quote unquote loot, right? And
Yeah.
in this case, IP is their loot.
Best kind of loot too.
Yeah. So we've got werewolves, vampires, mystics, angels, demons, all of these different things that are existing in the world. I think one of the elements that I really appreciate about Night City is that my character's personal journey as a quote unquote normal human has been I think early on I had to deal with a sanity check
Mm-hmm.
when some of the when the curtains were yanked back and suddenly I was staring out and what I thought, the reality that I know it was very different and we have sanity check. So I love games that have some sort of sanity check element.
Well,
Um,
yeah, because he was confronted with shit he'd never thought was even real. Like dealing.
right, and it's a fun like recurring. Wait, what? Vampires are real? Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Okay, next you're gonna tell me werewolves are real. Wait, what? Werewolves are real?
Yeah.
Right. So now he's like slowly becoming, you know, informed and learning about all this stuff. Um, but the idea that sanity is a stat that is a combination of other stats, right? This is that synergy system at work.
Yes.
That we have these skills that are based on a primary element, and then a secondary element that kind of informs that. So, like, if you're using a rifle, then yes, that's reflex as the primary, but then, that's also going to require cool as a secondary stat. And so, yes, you might be really good at aiming, but it's that pause, keeping calm, taking the breath, holding your breath while you're aiming and pulling the trigger, like all of that stuff that pushes you that little extra bit over the person who just has knack for rifles. You've got
Right.
that layer of training. And I love that differentiation because you don't have enough points to be trained in everything.
No.
You would suffer greatly if you were trained in everything.
Yeah, it'd be like a jack of all trades, way less than a master of none.
Right. But there are rewards for putting IP into a stat versus a skill. It's much more expensive. If you raise your reflex, that's going to inform all of the other skills that are tied to that. So handguns, acrobatics, dodge, stealth, rifle, all of those things will be improved. Um, but if you don't have enough points and you're like, I just need to get that little bit of edge on rifles, I'll put an extra point into rifles. Right.
Yep.
And so I love that very organic approach. And I feel that that's part of what makes Shadows unique, as a campaign setting, and synergy system as a rule set.
Yeah, the mechanics have to support it. I mean, that's the I think the core principle. Like, so it's funny, like this is the one thing that I find to be somewhat disconnected with a lot of other systems, is that the systems themselves are supposed to be like, whenever I finally discovered what the hell a mechanic system is for, I was like, okay, that makes sense, because the way the mechanics operate is the experience that the player gets. And that's when I suddenly started turning to all these other systems going like, what are you doing? Like, it's like, okay, yeah, it kind of has this feel, but the problem that I had with it is like, it's almost like the design of the games is to make it feel like a game. And like, that to me was always kind of like, man, that kind of sucks. And it's like,
Then you can metagame it, right? Then
right,
it's a game. It can be won.
right.
It's a way to
Well,
skirt around the rules.
enter Munchkins, min-maxers, and all the other people that are in it, trying to basically break the rules by not breaking them, but just like maximizing their advantage in crazy ways. And so to me, it just kind of like takes away where like the mechanics become the star of the show, and it's like,
Right.
I like the story and what the experience that they have is when they're playing it. Like, you want to go back and go like, holy crap, I can't believe I made it out of X, Y, and Z. I mean, that, like, they'll talk about the roles. It's, I didn't think I was going to make it, but really, the role is kind of invisible. It's the fact that it's like, we almost didn't make it. And there's not really a clarification of like, if I hadn't have done like, it doesn't have this.
If it only rolled a 17, it would have been. Yeah.
None of that discussion comes up. It's just like, damn it, I damn near died. That was nuts. If it's like, if this person had been here, or if he hadn't have done that, and it's talking about the players and their actions as opposed to like what the fuck rolls you had or the rest of it. You know what I mean? Like the excitement comes from the mechanics, but they take a back seat and they don't become the only thing that people are thinking about. I think that's the only thing that can slow this down, is that the mechanics themselves are complex enough that for somebody starting out, it can be like all they concentrate on is just like getting the mechanics down. But really, once you find that foundation underneath you, you forget. You just go like, oh, okay, I got to roll this and this. Okay, like that. Does it win? Does it not? And it's kind of like, but the mechanics they have to enrich whatever the experience is. Period. Like that's the only real rule that I had whenever I started trying to blend this stuff together. I mean, like, what makes this feel like it's something real? Like it's actually a world unto itself where these characters are operating, where there is real risk and real reward, and there is something that is fundamentally like an ordered chaos, and that's what it does. It's like these are the things that can kind of come along. It's ordered chaos all the way through, from the smallest microbe of the mechanics all the way out to the largest expansions. And like I think probably one of my favorite order chaos type things is the extended will check. Bar none, probably
Yes.
the most nail biting mechanic there is, because you just don't know how it's going to pan out. You have no
Well,
idea.
And we've been playing, not in person because it's the pandemic, and we're also separated by hundreds of miles, some of us. So, but regardless of that, we're playing through, using cameras, using digital dice rolling and all of that. So I can imagine how intimidating it would be to roll a contested will check on a table with
Right.
dice, right? So for our listeners, the will check is a contest between two players, or a player and an NPC, where you are doing a roll off, like what is it, factorial or whatever, where it's like your will is 9, so you're rolling 9 d10s trying to hit a target. So let's say the target is 8, so you're going to roll a d10 9 times and try and get as many 8s as you can, and then you're going to roll it 8 times, same target, 7 times, 6 times, 5, right? So in the end, you lose if you're getting a 1. That takes away one of your successes. If you get a 10, it's an extra die that you can roll, all that. So you might start off strong, and we've seen that, right, in games where and we never know our overall target of, like, you need 5 total successes to succeed or something like that. That's what you've kept that.
That's a contested roll. That's a contested roll because, in this case with your example, if it's 8, that means that the person you're fighting against, will-wise, only has a will of 8, so they have 8 dice to roll.
Right.
So they have to go chunk, 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 roll it, count the number of successes, take away a die, roll it again, count successes, or, and then repeat that cycle until there's no dice left. And then you have to compare totals, and you have no idea where it's going to end up.
You see that total go up and down, and I mean, right? We've had it where it's like, oh, you rolled that first, like you got 3 successes, then you roll it, the next set down. Oh, I got 2 more successes. All right, 5 total. Roll it again. Oop, I got a 1. Now I'm down to 4. Oop, I'm down to 3. Oop, I got 3 more. Now I'm up to 7. Like, I mean, nail biting, yes, absolutely, and it takes advantage of our digital format, being able to kind of copy paste those rolls in, and then we're all kind of staring at the line waiting for the total to spit out. But I think that I've never experienced that sort of mechanic in any of the systems I've played, at least not one that you can see visibly. I'm sure that there's a behind the scenes one in some computer RPG that's doing that, right? In D&D, they've got the contested check, but it's like, my strength versus your strength. One roll.
Yeah.
D20 plus some stats.
Yeah.
And for the most part, whoever has a higher bonus is going to win. Law of averages.
Generally, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And with the exploding 10s, with the crit fails, like adding and subtracting to that total,
it's an ordered chaos.
Incredible.
Yeah, yes. It's an ordered chaos. There are definitive rules, but we don't really know how it's going to pan out. and that
And
like
it's dramatic.
yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
it's
there is something to be said about an element of drama at the game that is not that I can't clever my way out of this. It's going to come down to this handful of dice.
yeah. Well, and obviously
And
not too
literal
many.
handful.
Yes, absolutely. And God forbid if you run into somebody who has automatic successes at the start of something like that, because
Right.
that is one harsh advantage. Although getting automatic successes at the start of a will check still does not guarantee success, and that's the best part is that shit can go down in just such a way that it just surprises everybody. But this is the same exact thing that movies try to do, like Harry Potter and Voldemort when they're blasting wands at each other. Like that's the only thing.
Yes.
Once going brr, 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 that's basically the
That
will check in action. The only difference is that we're not the audience going like, oh yeah, he's gonna make it. No, the players going like, fuck, 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 fuck. Like they're trying to win, and they're trying to tell their dice, you gotta win this shit for me. And who knows if they're listening?
yeah. Yeah, that is probably the best cinematic representation I have seen of that. Where literally they, casting a spell at each other, and it is pushing that orb back and forth,
Yeah,
to see what's going to happen. Um, and it's incredible. And that's not a mechanic that my character runs into. Um, but
yeah,
there are characters, especially those that are more like magically inclined, that is something that they run into. My character sprays bullets and drops creatures at 600 yards. Like, so that's my burden to bear, is that I'm counting down my ammunition, and at some point I'm going to have to restock all this magical specialty ammunition I have. But it's an incredible element, and I think the richness of the character design, like I said, which we'll go into in a different episode, but that combined with these will checks, it really helps you to, as a player, make this world your own. Um, and really, even though it's this gigantic megalopolis, two games could happen with two different sets of people, and they could have a very different, equally rich experience.
yeah. Well, and the superpowers involved are stable enough that they are not going to be shaken loose unless you really get up there. And so,
Right. And
and
if you get up there, you might get noticed.
not only that, but then if you it becomes a tale of battling kings, and that is always devastating. So when new powers arrives, the old ones try to make sure they don't lose a seat, because it becomes this power struggle similar to musical chairs. There's this assumption that somehow or another, if the new guy comes into it and starts reaching for the stars, if he manages to make it 3/4 of the way, that's a problem, because apparently there's not that many stars left in the universe at this point,
It's
so
a
they're going to have to
zero-sum
give theirs
game,
up.
right?
Yeah, it's the way that they look at it. A lot of them do anyway. It's the whole plot for power is always this really ridiculous, and I play it off like that. It's always the sense of like, those who are actually truly confident in what they are don't get involved, and they are usually the more invisible of the superpowers. But those ones that are not so self-assured are the ones that start causing all kinds of ruckus and ripple, and hard to avoid that. But that's just part of the fun too. Not to mention the fact that Night City is not the only place that you can be, because the unseen courts, that layer just below, they have access to entirely different realms altogether. There are ad infinitum realms. They just go on forever. It doesn't matter what is going on or what concept you can conjure up. You have realms that are true realms that exist as part of the planes of the whole universe, and then you have Neverlands, which are conjured up fictional ones that more or
Right.
less
Little
this.
pocket dimensions.
Yeah, they're just basically some mage decided that he wanted to have his have his summer home without having to pay for it. So he just made it and put it into a painting or into a door, or as one psychotic Malkavian vampire assassin did, threw it into his damn hanky. Um,
There you go.
yeah, it's
So I think we're kind of getting close to like wrapping up this first foray into it.
yeah,
Um, you know, Night City is also not the only place, right? This is set in Earth in the year 2074. Pocket dimensions and realms aside, Night City is the eastern seaboard, right? So
hmm
there's a whole world to explore. There's, literally other continents. There's the rest of the former United States. Right? You feel like what's going on in Texas, what's going on in California, um, what's going on in Japan, right? We've got these mega corporations. I'm sure that they have left their mark everywhere, uh, and that's one of the things that as a game master, if you're inhabiting this world, you can have some freedom to set something there. You can have a player that comes from outside of Night City, um, and that's just so there's some their dragons are here on these parts of the map, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, well, that's it. I've actually played one character. I think he was from Georgia at one point. Yeah, he was from Georgia, I think. He was a beastkin who had thick glasses. He was a batkin, but he was very strange. He had to wear overalls because his wings actually attached to his arms,
Oh,
like an actual bat. So he had to wear overalls because the webbing would attach near the hip.
right.
So he didn't want to walk around with his dangle hanging around. So he's like, I can't do that. So he's wearing overalls all the time. So he was a hillbilly hick with a long rifle, and he was a bat, a big one. And so as far as like most of the beastkin are concerned, he was the more animalistic conversion. He could not pass as human, not really. But he had these big glasses. They were like goggles that had a strap around the back of his head. And he was just sort of like, I'm gonna hang out in this church. Like, and he just kind of like dangled from the ceiling rafters in this abandoned church and ran into trouble anyway. But I mean, like, he was just a nice guy trying to do his thing. Like, we're talking like full blown country boy in the big city because he just needed to go around and see what was going on. And he didn't go very far, but he was a fun character to play because he had to get used to all this crap. And I think he ended up saving some teenager or something like that because they were using that church for, like hiding drugs or doing something nefarious, and then they got caught by some other group that was wanting to make them pay for theft, things like that.
It like I said, it's so rich. I'm excited to delve more into it. I think maybe to close out this episode, I just wanted to read this part that we've got from the CRB for anybody who's like on the fence. Is this an interesting world for them or whatever?
Yeah.
The core rulebook. So the world of shadows. It's 2074, and the world as you know it is headed downhill. Things have changed dramatically in the last 100 years, and not necessarily for the better. Technology has exploded into an enormous, cancerous monster. It feeds on the distrust, corporate greed, and malcontent of citizens who live within the city borders. At street level, it's all about survival. Much of the wealth that rises from the depths comes from the drugs and violence of the common man struggling for a better life. In the skyscrapers crowding every block, private wars are plotted and regulated through the only promise worth noticing: money. From the air, much of the metropolis, which covers the entirety of the eastern seaboard, seems like a new-aged hellscape. The silhouettes of glassy buildings are like monolithic teeth pushing up from the concrete, garbage, and blood of the streets below. Smog smothers the skies and glows orange at night from the ever-present radiance of city lights flickering and flashing underneath. Night City is the nightmare-given life, fueled from the broken promises of a better world when hope still existed. Rife with violence daily, there is no way to know when the next gang war, private corporate squabble, or underground descent will disrupt the lives of the more meager populace as they make their way through the city in the day-to-day business. While there are many known threats in plain sight, the hidden supernatural world is all-encompassing and masquerades as the mundane. Much of the city now is saturated with strange beings, and there are only a small few who understand the existence of such things. It used to be, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. It's hard to comprehend how twisted and maligned that's become. In Night City, if you can make it here, someone else kills you and will do it for cheaper.
I forgot I wrote that.
That is Chef's kiss. Welcome to the world of shadows.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. I don't think I've fallen short of that promise whatsoever.
Not at all. All right, so I'm looking forward to looking into further elements of the game design, looking at character creation, and all of these other elements that we can share with folks as we dig further.
Right, and anybody who actually comes across to view this, please leave comments on what you'd want to hear next, if anything, because I want to keep these episodes up and coming and just rolling through, because we're trying to push this out, because this stuff is in active motion right now, And
Yes.
no, there's no better time than trying to crystallize, galvanize, or make changes. Like this is it. We're in the middle of that particular crucible. So this is time is now. Yeah. So if there's anything there, like if somebody wants to leave a comment, please do. I'm interested. I want to see if anybody actually has anything to say. But because we can always address certain points about what's going on or questions that might be had.
Well, and who knows? There might be something that someone else has a burning question about that has never crossed our minds.
Right. Yeah. So anything that goes along those lines.